Narravan Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. It is time to continue my discussion on Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, the second edition of AD&D. Where we last left off, we finished up talking about some important material, but today, let's talk about time. So the fact is, there are really two ways that your DM can track time. Simple, complex. Time is going to travel throughout your games no matter what you do. Time is an important factor that even if you digress and ignore most of the passage of time, it will happen in some way. And a dungeon master can be as exact when it comes to the time as they want to, detailing it minute by minute, round by round, day by day. Or they can do it in the most general material that they need, that they can keep to the basics. Just everything you need and nothing more. There are advantages and disadvantages for doing either of these things, for being very exact or for being very, loose when it comes to timekeeping. Both function perfectly fine, or the fact is, you could kind of switch in between the two of them as is necessary for the game that you're running. Sometimes it might require you to have more exact timekeeping, other times less. Regardless of how your dungeon master is really looking at time, you're going to have to handle it sometime. Spells have durations. Combat, it's fought in rounds. Various other things will have measurements of time you're going to need to keep track of. So there's going to be a level of timekeeping no matter what. But these basics, the important basics, this could be all that you handle. This could literally be everything you do and you could ignore the rest. This passage of time, though, whatever happens during an adventure, does not affect the next adventure. So it really doesn't matter how much time passed here. As soon as we start the next adventure, I'm unaffected by the time that passed there. There's technically no real effect on the way that the adventure should be pulled out. Granted, I, as a dungeon master, could specifically write in something that said if they took too long in the last adventure, it has an effect on this one. But that's just me actually choosing for that to happen. On an intrinsic level, when I'm just running two different adventures, should not affect each other. So again, this is most adventures, passage of time, unimportant. I have to write it in when it's important. The basics, they can be the only timekeeping I keep track of. It really can. That would mean that if we're having one session to the next, I can say, oh, it's right away. We're continuing where we left off. Or if they're going to rest in a village, bam, they do that. They recover and heal up. We don't even sit around, keep track of it. I just say they're healed up. They're ready to go the next time they're heading out. Or we move in from one adventure to the next. If there's some kind of passage of time needed, I'm just saying like, bam, it's done. Okay, you need how many months? Okay, it's done. You got what you needed done. Bam. We don't care about the details when it comes to this passage of time. It just occurs, and the results of it are given. Also, the passage of time, little effect between sessions. At the end of the session, if we said we rested to healed, next session we're healed up. Or if there was no change in time between it, well, we were still injured. Or, if we said we rested 3 hours, 3 hit points. It's whatever we said at the end of last session happens at the end of last session. New session, whatever we were waiting, whatever we were doing over there. Time-wise, no effect. What our actions are doing, that will probably have an effect. But time-wise, these two are separated out into their own time schemes. I don't worry about the passage of time. I could have it that it's the next morning, the next day here, and the next session could be months later, and these connections together are only basically me saying some time has passed. And that's it. There is nothing special about time here. I, as a DM, are estimating, winging the time. I'm just saying like, oh, time passed. Calling it a day. Thing is, nothing wrong with this. Nothing at all. This way of doing things isn't even unrealistic. The fact is, when I would say just time would pass in this village or city, a lot of times medieval travelers would stay around an area for periods of time while they were relatively safety before moving on again. So for your PCs to be sticking around an area for a period of time before moving on, perfectly reasonable. It makes sense. Generally speaking, for travelers like them, there's little incentive to be hurrying along. Maybe they need a little bit more money and that might compel them to go to the next place for an adventure, but most of the time, you could earn some extra cash in a town you're in or something, so why rush? This is an easy way, the easiest way of doing things. Not only does your DM not have to worry about, well, a lot of things you would have to worry about as a DM, timekeeping, watching a calendar, things like that. Your players don't have concern about things that might limit them on time, like, oh, we have to rest this amount of time just to make sure we're healing, but we have a limited schedule to do it. It's more like, you rested and healed up and you're going on your journey now. That's it. You don't have to worry yourself about those time-constraining things as a player. Now, it seems like this is the greatest system that you can use, but there are some disadvantages to this simplistic timekeeping system. These problems are really not pronounced at lower levels. When you get to higher levels is when these problems starts to actually manifest itself. Think about it this way. An adventure for a low-level player, simple dungeon crawl, might take a few hours. Stuff in between, they only have a couple small things they can do. Higher level player, more epic adventures, longer adventures that may take days and weeks to complete. The things they want to do in between adventures become more ambitious and greater and need more time. Here's where we're talking about the unavoidable act. When two players, or two groups of players, decide to do different things. Now, this just might mean actually going and doing small adventures on their own, and that's splitting the party, which is an entirely different thing to talk about. There are merits and problems with that, always. But even if we're in town doing in-town activities, and we're splitting up what everybody is doing, each person choosing a different thing that will take a different amount of time, if my activity of making a magic item will take a couple of months, and my friend's activity will take a week, whatever he wants to do, and then he wants to come in and have me help him out with something else, well, I'm making a magic item. Is he going to have to wait until I'm done this? Or am I interrupting this and changing what I'm doing, and therefore I've already rolled to make this magic item on my own because my dungeon master will go to each person figuring out what they're doing. You see here, we're messing with time because we're not synced up. This happens when two groups can separate out. A group traveling to somewhere else to maybe get some information might take weeks, while our group that remained in town, whatever they do on their session, might have only taken them days. What are they going to do in that remaining time? If one of the people wants to teleport to the other group, well, are they teleporting in the middle of their adventure? If I've already rolled out their adventure traveling there, he wasn't included in it. We've gotten disaligned at time. You can see how things begin to separate out because we are not keeping track of this time. And different activities take different amount of times. Splitting the party is the most obvious point where you really want to keep track of the time period between the two of them. But it can occur in other situations. And this is the main crux of the problem with the simple system. It doesn't account for times when we're doing different stuff. Because my activity might take far less than someone else's activity. What the heck am I doing with the extra time? Now, this doesn't mean we can't come up with excuses and plans and things that me over here with my very small activity can actually fill up all this time with until you're ready to join with me. But it can get a little ridiculous, and that's why more detailed timekeeping might be helpful in this case, because you can keep track of these changes in times and plan them out accordingly. And you can sort of get an idea what everybody's doing before they actually do it. Therefore, if I'm planning on starting a magic item and you're doing something that's a couple days and then you need my help with something else, I know that before I get started. Now, if we're going detailed, an important detail that can help you out is a calendar. And making a calendar can be a very large task, a very difficult task. The easiest thing you could do, go and buy a calendar and look up what the date of your starting the game session is. So let's say you're starting the game session on May 1st. You look up May 1st. That's when your game starts in the game world. It's May 1st. Now, your game might accelerate far beyond the calendar that you are in real life, but you've used this as a starting point. You can use this to keep track of things like seasons, bird migrations, the moon phases, things that make the world feel more alive. When you start adding things in, holidays too, all this information, all these things make it feel like a more organic world because you're linking it together with changing. The world that we live in changes over time, and it cycles through various cycles. If it does the same in your world, it feels more alive. So there is this advantage to having a calendar. But we're talking about a modern calendar now, and modern holidays, modern information, which does not necessarily fit in with your feel of the medieval world. So you're going to want to customize your calendar. And there are a number of ways that you can customize your calendar. The first major one I want to mention today, you're going to go over a couple of details that are very important. Number of weeks in the year. How long the year is in general, both weeks, days, months. So number of months, number of weeks, the entire thing, number of days, names of months. You can see already with these basics, I've come up with a pretty good basic for a calendar. I could use our system, 12 months, just change the names, keep the days the same, keep the weeks the same. I could add weeks, subtract weeks, add days, subtract days, make months twice as long and half the number of months. You can see how already we're customizing things. You can make the names sound realistic like ours. You can make them sound ultra fantasy-like. Like the month of the winter's moon, because it's like the dead of winter in there. That's when the winter solstice would be. You can see that there's a customization that you can easily do here that really adds flavor to your game very easily. But that's it for today. We talked about, of course, time. There are two methods for it. An easy method where you don't keep track of a lot of time, only the basics you need, and a more difficult one where you keep track of everything's time. There's an advantage and a disadvantage to both of them. One's easy, one's difficult. One faces problems when people start doing individual things or teams split up, especially at higher levels. And of course, one might bog down the game. So you can see both systems are useful. And we started talking about making your own calendar, which in the next episode, we're going to continue to dive into talking about making your own calendar. And we'll start then talking about, next to time is movement. But if you have any questions, comments, anything you want to say, anything you think I left out, please leave in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe. It should support the channel, the empire, the work I do. If you want to show some extra support, you can always check out my Patreon, link description below. There's some great rewards there. It helps to grow and improve the channel and the empire. But regardless, until the next time, I bid you farewell.